From baseball player to professional wrestler, we're talking about the first few years of the WWF's career of, ooh yeah, the Macho Man Randy Savage. Mooney, how you doing today?
Oh yeah, everybody does an imitation of the Macho Man. Oh
Ooh.
yeah, cause I'm the cream of the crop. Oh yeah, can you dig it, brother? Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
freak out, freak out.
Give me some Slim Jims. I'm
Now the
into it.
voice
I'm
is
into
gone
it.
for the rest of it. And
Yeah.
and I just want to say, Stan, thanks for filling in today for Steve. Folks, he's he's not feeling well. I don't know, but his twin stepped in today, and we've got Stan with us. What the heck
Actually,
happened? Oh my! Oh
actually,
yeah,
I
brother,
am.
you
I'm.
gotta go with the whiskers, brother.
Gotta.
Oh yeah, where are they, brother?
They fell off. I'm
Yeah.
actually. My name is actually Ian. Ian Fall today, and
Oh, we're
just
not.
want to
Don't talk
say.
about that bum.
Oh,
I don't want
oh,
to
yeah.
talk about that guy.
He owes you 20
Still
bucks.
owes me money.
I know, that bastard. But
Yeah,
yes,
talking though about brothers, Lanny Poffo, we know that Randy Poffo comes from that family with the father Angelo Poffo, and they have quite a lineage here. But I learned a lot about Randy doing my interview with Lanny years back before his
mm,
passing, and just fascinating journey for Randy Savage, which I'm glad we're going to get into a bit today because we've talked about Randy many times, but
yeah,
there's a lot of things that I don't think people even know about Randy at this point. So let's get into it.
I
Yeah,
know. So
dig it.
before, like, I want to get into something personal for you first, though. Like, what you've always shared the story of when you show up in the WWF and people are speaking carny around you and they're not
Mhm.
trusting you at first. What was Macho Man's first impression of you? What was his first reaction?
Oh, I'm sure he was not impressed at all. Uh, and I've talked about some people, they welcome you in and they couldn't have been nicer and they made you feel right at home. Randy Savage was not that guy.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that he was a jerk or made it rough on you or played nasty ribs or anything like that. It's just that until you proved yourself to him in his mind, and he felt that you had respect for the business, respect for him, you just didn't really exist. He did whatever he had to do with you because he was a professional to the peak. But at the same time, you had to earn your way in to have any kind of a relationship with him. So when I got to the WWF, it wasn't hey, oh yeah, anything I can do for you,
Right.
that wasn't it at all. And you just and I kind of wondered, like, man, he just doesn't like me or something, which was stupid on my part. Like, who cares? But when you're there and you're in and you're working, you're trying. It took a long, long time, as I've told the story. So, but that's how Randy was in coming up through that generational life of the professional wrestling. That's how the business worked. That was old school
True.
with Randy.
Good. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
protecting the business. Now they're shooting
absolutely.
backstage videos about what's happening and how they're writing the storylines and putting it out there. So at this point, they're like protecting it from you. Now they're like, let's film it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I didn't come from there, so naturally he's a little wary, and he doesn't know. Nobody. His Hope told me don't unpack. They didn't know how long you're going to be around,
Hmm.
and it's just reps is really what it comes down to. They keep seeing you, or they see. I knew that they watched the shows, and I was in every single one of them. And then you show up to these arenas and do interviews with them, and it's just reps, one after another, and they learn who you are. And at that point, they either decide to accept you or you never get past that door.
Well, you made it past that door, so good,
Yeah.
good for you. That, but it's strange when you do research about certain wrestlers. You think, if your brother is a wrestler and your father's a wrestler, you're going to be a wrestler like right off the bat. But
Yeah.
baseball player, the Macho Man. A lot of wrestlers are skilled in different sports, but you never really hear about the Macho Man being signed by the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be a catcher, ends up in the outfield, in the minor league a little bit, but it's mind blowing when you see a baseball card there he is, no sunglasses, just a regular
Oh,
dude in a
yeah.
Macho Man skin, it seems.
Oh, well, yeah, just incredible that he was a tremendous athlete. Really could do everything. And, and him and Lanny were 2 years apart. Randy, the older brother, and Lanny certainly was an accomplished professional wrestler. That's all he really ever did. I mean, he was part of the business from the beginning. He was wrestling at a very early age professionally. He was already wrestling at 18. But Randy was a different story. He was a really gifted athlete, loved baseball, and really thought that that could be his path. And in high school, he was certainly good enough to at least get signed. As Lanny said, he wasn't one of those bonus babies. He didn't get a lot of money. I think he said when he was in the system, he was making like $500 a month. So even then, this is the early '70s,
Yeah.
and it doesn't go really far. But what was another, like I said, you're going to learn a few things about Randy you didn't know, that Lanny said he was a card shark. Like he was legit a great card player. And he said when he was in the farm system, because his dad had even offered, he wanted, Angelo, of course, eventually Randy would end up in the business, but he
Yeah.
wanted his son to pursue his dream and knew that if he could make it professionally in baseball, that might certainly prove to be a very lucrative career for him.
True.
And so he was supporting him in his dream and as far as he could take it. So he'd offered to, help subsidize him during this process. And Randy's like, "Oh, no, don't need it. All good." Because he was skinning these guys in the locker rooms playing cards. And he said he could have made a living at it,
Wow.
like as a professional poker player and had even made, later on when had made trips to Vegas and had been asked to leave casinos because he could count cards. And that was something that really surprised me. I'd never heard that before, but coming from Lanny, I believe it.
Of course.
And so that was just another part of Randy Savage that there were so many things that you would just keep going, really? Randy did that? Or the kind of person he was, and really thought that he could make his way in professional baseball. And during that process, when he gets signed there, he separates his shoulder,
Yeah.
a hard slide, and turns out that it's basically would be a career-ending injury. But in the process of that, this shows you just how committed the guy was. That he threw right. That was the shoulder that got destroyed. And so what does he do? He learns to throw with his left arm.
I know.
And I mean, think about this, not just being able to play baseball at the level wherever he was, but professionally
Right.
in the system, making throws to first base was just unbelievable. And I'm sure it affected his batting too, but at some point it just wasn't going to happen. I mean, they told him, and his batting average, his stats weren't bad. I think he hit somewhere in the mid 200s, which in baseball,
Yeah.
folks, you hit 300, you're great. Hit that ball 3 times out of 10.
254 was his batting average.
Yeah,
16
was it?
home
Okay.
runs,
Yeah,
129
home runs,
RBIs.
you know, respectable. But
I
doing
can't
that
do that.
with throwing with the other arm
That's
and
crazy to me.
having to adjust everything hitting wise and everything he did was incredible. But it wasn't meant to be. That basically ended his career. And as Lanny tells the story that when he got that final, because I think he tried 3 different times where he would go and get to the last cut and then come back. He finally accepted reality, and he's talks about how you always had your big bag, like a hockey bag, but in this case it's your baseball bag, and it's got your mitts in it and your bats and all. And he said he took that thing, threw it in the trash,
Wow.
and that was it. baseball was over, and he accepted, okay, I'm going to be a professional wrestler. But just an unbelievable athlete. And at this point, he isn't the Macho Man. He hasn't developed that gimmick or anything.
No.
And part of his contract, Steve, was that during the off season, you're not allowed to do other sports because they don't want you to get hurt. So you can't go off and play football somewhere and but he wanted to earn money, so he wrestled with a mask and became this Spider-Man character.
The
And he was,
spider.
yeah, with the spider, and he was, a little scrawny at this point. And you would, if you see pictures of him from what you would see later on in the WWF, a very different picture. But he could really move in the ring, and that persona of the kind of the Spider-Man look worked for him. But the idea of it was that he could work in a mask and nobody would know who he was. And that's how he could work during the off season. And that's, when he did make that transition, it wasn't as though he had to really just pick up and learn how to wrestle again. So that all paid off in the end because he was still dipping into the business at that point.
And what's crazy is years later, many years later, when the Spider-Man movie first came out and
Yeah.
Spider-Man's fighting a wrestler in the ring, it's the Macho Man as Bonesaw. So it just all comes back around. If you knew that
Yeah.
the Macho Man used to be the Spider, inspired by Spider-Man, now he's actually in the Spider-Man movie fighting Spider-Man. To me, that's a pretty cool callback. All those years, if you
Oh,
knew.
and my God, he was massive. Like never ever when he was with the WWF, WWE was he ever that
Bonesaw.
massive. And I'm sure he was getting a little assistance, but I've never seen in that movie just, oh yeah. I mean, oh, all blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you dig it?
Oh, yeah. I don't think they test
Gigantic.
actors. I'm not saying he was or wasn't, but I'm not. But I don't think that's why certain wrestlers or who are movies look a little bigger in the movies than they do in the ring. A little
No,
different. I don't know why still wrestlers are tested. Honest to God, like it's a show. I'm
yeah.
sorry, it doesn't make any sense. But eventually, instead of the Spider, we do get Randy Savage, which is a great last name because even today,
Mhm.
when memes and gifs are sent to people and someone insults somebody else, ooh, that was savage. It's always the Macho Man in the gif. So I think that's pretty funny. And Ole Anderson reportedly said that Poffo doesn't really
Yeah.
fit this tough and
Yeah.
wrestler. We would need someone who's savage, and it feels like it's such a natural last name. But I
Mhm.
feel like when you think of names like, oh, I'm gonna be like dangerous. My name is like Danny Dangerous.
Yeah. Right.
But Savage, I don't know. It felt perfect for him.
Yeah, no, that's a great name, and he was described as being a savage in the ring. I think that's where Ole kind of got that idea, and as a young man, and we certainly saw the Randy Savage that was intense,
Mm.
yeah, but even then, and still that youthful exuberance, shall we say. Randy was a bit of a hothead, that we saw that he did have a hairpin trigger. But back then, he was, maybe not the toughest guy, but he had no issues throwing it down. And, there were points that his father started ICW, International
Yes,
Championship Wrestling,
that's what we can talk about
and it was
next.
this outlaw outfit because he was sick of these other territories basically controlling everything, and started this that wasn't affiliated with the NWA and all these other affiliations that you had to adhere by. It was like the Mafia families,
The
and
territories, I
started
guess. Yeah.
yeah, and started this. And there was some serious heat back then. And we talk about old school. Uh, you're threatening somebody's business, you're threatening somebody's livelihood. And, it was serious. These guys would, go at it. And Randy was one of those guys that was right there in the forefront. And there's legendary stories of brawls and feuds that he had with people. We've talked about Jerry Lawler and all he did for a lot of
Yeah.
wrestlers in the business, but he also had a lot of heat. And because he was part of the business and he had part of the territories there, and that was a big rivalry between the two. And you can imagine that Lawler's outfit didn't like the idea that you had this other rebel group out there. And they had, you can go back and you can find some of their old promos, and they had a television show. They got on a television station there and weekly had these matches on TV, and that was directly cutting into, and they had a pretty loyal fan base and some pretty big names. Cowboy Bob Orton was one of the guys that worked with
Yeah.
them, and uh, you know, uh, who would become One Man Gang. He was part of that. George Gray, and so
Yeah.
they had some pretty big names, guys that were well known in the business, and it would come to a head to the point where when we would see some of this later on with the WWF and the Attitude Era of WWE, but they would go to the shows. The wrestlers from ICW would go to these
Yeah.
shows and harass the wrestlers as they would go into the arena with Lawler's group, and it got really nasty.
I know it's funny you bring that up because, like, for instance, like when you have ICW being a federation, the Macho Man, Randy Savage is on commentary or
Yeah,
doing promos, and he's calling out other organizations, which worked perfectly for ECW. And then the WWF did the same thing to WCW. WCW
yeah,
did it to WWF.
yeah.
I'm always shocked though when wrestling, like, all right, Angelo Poffo opens his company. His sons are doing a great job in the company. It's doing well. And other wrestling organizations are like, how dare you? Like they take
Oh
it in this
yeah,
they take it in this weird mafia way. It's like, well, what if you have a pizza joint and another pizza joint opens in town? Like, are you telling me that's not allowed? Like competition is
yeah.
not welcomed? We
Right
have
next
what we
door.
have, so
Yeah.
don't touch it?
Yeah, well, that's really how it worked. That's how it survived for all those years. And of course, the epitome of it was Vince McMahon moving in and eventually destroying all of those
Yeah, he's the
territories.
McDonald's of wrestling. Like you buy out all
Yeah,
these mom
but
and pop burger places and then you own it all.
yeah, but back then you respected each other's territories, and they
Mm,
said, you carved
yeah.
out your little area here, and all right, you stay over there, and you have your own little TV market over there, and we've got ours, and we can exchange talent when it gets stale, and this whole system worked, and they had an alliance. They called it an alliance. So then you've got an upstart coming at it, basically another gang moving in on your in the
Right.
neighborhood and the turf, and you're like, what the hell? And they're like, F you, you don't own this, and why can't we?
Yeah.
And it got really serious. I mean, there's a point where these guys, as I mentioned, they would go to the arenas, and there was one point where they were going to go and beat Lawler up.
Right.
Jerry Lawler, like legit, they were going to wait for him outside this arena. When he got there, they were going to beat the crap out of him, and they knew that if anything, it was going to get their attention and the notoriety of it. It was a stunt, maybe, but real punches were going to be thrown, and Jerry Lawler would have probably been seriously hurt.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, he had broken his leg for him that he wasn't at the arena that day. But that also sparked a feud that between Randy and which was also connected to other issues with Bill Dundee, who was another huge
Yes.
name back then, and just really the wild, wild west. And that's how things got settled. That's how business was done because we would see later that Jerry Lawler would actually help them, and it was a part of it to, hey, you can't beat them, join them in a
Yes,
sense,
of course.
and would lead to great fortune eventually for Randy Savage because then he would end up in the WWF, which is
I'm
a whole
glad you
other
brought
story.
up Bill Dundee because as Randy Savage is developing his new persona, he has started using the moniker Macho Man.
Macho Man. Hmm.
And Bill Dundee used to use that phrase, Macho Man, underneath, his name. But like we have the Nature Boy Ric Flair, we have the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Like it's
Yeah.
really up to you on like is it really yours, or is it just a name that someone else can, use over here when
You don't
no
have,
one
yeah, you don't
knows?
have copyright on
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah.
don't own the term Macho Man. So, yeah, apparently there's all these conflicting stories about Bill Dundee and the Macho Man having this fight where Macho Man's waiting outside of a gym. Bill Dundee comes out, Macho Man sucker punches him. They fight. Other stories are he pistol whipped Bill Dundee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very interesting when you hear stories of the Macho Man. You said he has his temper very small. It would go from 0 to 1,000 very
Yeah.
quick. So when you hear, Dundee suffered a broken bone in his eye, he
Yeah.
later Dundee apparently got his gun from his truck during the confrontation. Like these are all wrestling stories, so you depend on what you want to believe. But when
Right.
police couldn't come
Lore.
involved, both sides
Wrestling
eventually
lore.
dropped charges against each other. Like, oh, he pistol whipped me. The police are here. Oh no, sir, we love each other. Oh, we're best
Yeah.
friends,
Right. Yeah.
dude. Like you're bringing up the Wild Wild West. This is something that was so normal. It felt like then.
Oh, yeah, it was. That was
In wrestling, that
part
is.
part of it. Yeah, because remember, kayfabe, all of this has to appear real.
Yes.
And if these guys went to a bar, and there's always going to be some Yahoo who thinks that it's fake, or he's going to insult them, or he can get the best of this guy, and if he does, he's going to be
The hero.
go off in front of his friends. It
Oh.
rarely happened that there wasn't some kind of confrontation when these guys would go out. And there were promoters that if you got your ass beat, just put your bag in your car because you're not going to wrestle for me.
Right.
Yeah, so it really was the wild, wild west back then, and you settled it with your fists. And Randy had quite a reputation. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily that he was the greatest fighter or anything like that, but boy, would he fight you, though. He would, you know, and he was not a big guy. I mean, considering some of the behemoths that were out there, and he would take on anybody. So that's the way he was back then. He wouldn't take shit from anybody, and that was pretty much it for his whole career. But back then, there was another incident that wasn't necessarily wrestling related, where he got into a fight at you've heard about it, the Waffle House incident that really he could have ended up in prison over that. So.
Let's talk about that for a second, though, because you got to skip over the Waffle House story, because boy, this is legendary. Because you get another what is real, what isn't real, where Savage is insulting a married customer, newly married customers in the Waffle House.
Well, the story goes.
Yes,
being,
the
like
story's
you said,
very strange.
Randy insulting the other side. It goes. I mean, Lanny. I remember him telling me about it. That it was the guy who was recently married that was mouthing off that he was not. He wasn't harassing Randy, but he was harassing customers in this place. And Randy told him to shut up or whatever that. But whatever the story was, that there was this confrontation. And the guy pulls a knife, and out of who knows, maybe Randy was getting the best of him. He pulls a knife out. Randy jumps over the counter, grabs a knife, and then realizes it's a butter knife. Like all these stories that go with it. Like the lore of it. But we do know the cops showed up.
Yeah,
and we do know it got pretty ugly.
We got pepper spray. We got multiple officers being attacked by Savage. We also have the police dog showing up and attacking Savage.
He took a bite out of crime, or
apparently
Randy's
Savage
ass, I think it was.
and Savage kicks the dog because he's being subdued. The dog severely bit Savage in the butt cheek.
Yeah, right.
Like, there is a lot happening here. Again, this is one of those wrestling lore stories where you're like, okay, people are pepper sprayed in the face, but they don't feel it. There's two knives. One has a smaller one. That's like a very, Austin Powers thing. Like, oh, you got a knife? I got a knife too. Oh, it's a butter
that's not a knife. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is a knife. Like that.
This is a butter knife.
And then, one of these types of deals. I remember very Mel Brooks. So,
but whatever happened, because you said that's as this wrestling lore gets passed down and the stories get embellished and all of that. But we do know that Randy was one tough MRFer. That's just the way he lived his whole life. That he didn't take crap from anybody. And, that was handed down from his father, and who set that example. You can see it right there. The fact that he starts this whole wrestling organization all on his own, just to
For his
go up
sons
against all
too.
of these guys. So you could, that he was one tough son of a bitch. So this is who Randy was, and would fight for everything. Intense. I think if there's like the one word, everything about his life was intense. Everything he did was intense. That's just how he operated, and it would take him to incredible heights in professional wrestling. Once he got on that path, there was no stopping the guy.
He just feels like someone who couldn't. I can't imagine the Macho Man Randy Savage sitting in a recliner watching TV. I can't. I don't. You know what I mean? Like I don't see
Yeah.
him in a relaxed mode at all. Like if he is in it, he's like just like shaking, like I'm gonna like I can't imagine his level ever can go down. Like it's only up. But I didn't know him, personally or work with him every day. But according to again lore, is this Macho Man persona, the way he acts and the way he talks isn't actually how he talks and acts. This is a persona he created and he stuck with it and he was in gimmick 24/7. Do do you know any truth to that?
No, I think that Randy did live it. He was the Macho Man all the time. And that voice, he didn't, change his voice and have this different voice. He always talked. Yeah, that's the way he was. Every time he talked, it was this the way
Okay.
he operated, and he lived it. I know that. Remember Jake telling the stories that he'd be in an airport and full spandex with
Oh,
boots
wow.
on. Yeah, boots on and the whole thing. And he'd be bitching about like all these people coming up to me, like that. And Jake's saying, well, if you didn't have the fucking spangles and the
Right.
the
You
cowboy
don't
hat,
see me with
they know who
Damien.
you are. like, but I don't know, about that. But
Okay.
he did live it. That Randy did live it. It was maybe a more subdued Macho Man,
Mm-hmm.
but he was always Macho Man.
Okay.
He didn't have this other persona that changed when he came out from the curtain. When he came backstage, like, oh yeah, hey guys, how are you? Yeah, it was a pretty good day. Yeah, weather was good. Or out there, it wasn't that. Randy was all the time,
Because I,
all the
in my
time.
brain,
Why
I
not?
just, my example again is the recliner watching TV. I can't see
Yeah,
him being that
yeah, and
person.
don't you think it seems like it'd just be exhausting to be that way all the time? That
Yeah, man. Like
yeah,
you must be
everything he did.
tired.
Yeah.
Must be on a lot of
Ooh, I'm
coffee.
gonna go get a cup of coffee. It's
Right.
gonna
Like
be
my
good. I'm
10th
gonna make sure I don't
today.
put too
Didn't you
much
just wake up?
cream in it. Yeah, honey, do you want me to get some eggs? Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Why are you wearing a cowboy hat in the kitchen?
Yeah,
I gotta do it, gotta live it.
yeah.
But after the
Mm,
years of the
cream
territory,
rises to the
yeah, yeah,
top. Remember
you get
that
it, right? You
promo?
know that
One of my
joke? I've made it
best.
before.
Yeah, Mean Gene.
It's like, honey, there is no mean gene here. It's just me and you in the
Yeah,
kitchen.
yeah.
I can see that
All right,
happening.
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
No, there he is over in the
yeah,
corner.
yeah. He's in the recliner watching TV. I
Yeah.
can see me and Gene relaxing with a cocktail or two. Savage, I can't imagine sitting
And
down.
I experienced those, yes, many
Yes,
a night.
yes. We got to do a Mean Gene someday episode. But
Love me some
eventually,
Mean
though,
Gene.
after years of the Macho Man being in different federations, working with the Jarretts, being in his own father's corporation, he comes to the WWF. Now, he makes his debut in June of 1985. Now, think about this. WrestleMania 1 was in March of 1985, and that was a huge success. And this is probably one of those talents where you're like, oh, well, we got to keep adding in more people. We got to keep adding more talent in. Like, are you
Mm.
surprised the Macho Man? It took him. They were like, oh, WrestleMania was a success. Can you use that on your resume when you go to the Macho Man? Like, listen, we want you to sign with us. Did you see WrestleMania 1? Did you see us on MTV?
Well, the you're talking about when it became mainstream.
Yes.
Prior to this, the WWF was already, everybody was hearing about it and what was
Yeah,
going
83,
on up
84.
there.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and so everybody wanted to be there. They knew about these growing houses, which, as we know and have discussed many times, that's where you made your money. So if you're hearing about an organization that's putting, 10, 12, 15,000 people into arenas every night, you want a piece of that cake.
Yes.
And so that was definitely the place to be. Um, you know, Lanny talks about how he felt Randy could have been there from the beginning. I mean, he was that good then. So you can imagine how seasoned he had become by the time he did eventually get the call. Who Lanny credits Jimmy Hart,
Wow.
of all people. It's not a surprise because
No.
Jimmy's name continues to come up from just about everybody you talk about. I just spoke with Raymond Rougeau, and he just talks about how great it was to work with Jimmy Hart and all he did for them. But Steve, and you've interviewed a lot of these guys too, and Jimmy's name just comes up all the time.
Yeah.
How devoted he was to the business, how much he did to help them along the way, and the connections that he helped them make. And for Randy, Jimmy Hart, they had worked with him many times. Jimmy, of course, the mouth of the South, and that's where all this was happening. And Jimmy knew talent when he saw it, and he did everything he could to help push it. Pretty much, he would have done it anyway, but also knowing if I help push these guys along, maybe I'll get caught in the draft. And
Yeah.
and he helped so many people, and it was so talented. But they credit the ride to the WWF with Jimmy putting them on the radar, and then them eventually getting the call to come up and come into the WWF. And that to me is just no surprise though, because Jimmy, that's who he was, is, and remains to this day one of the most loved figures in professional wrestling.
It's funny as you said that with there's two names that always get brought up, and either in Jimmy Hart gets brought up, it's always love. The other name that
Oh
always
yeah,
gets brought up is Jerry Lawler, and it's either you love him or you hate him. There's
yeah,
no like in between on
yeah.
that guy. Jimmy Hart though, he gets all the love, but you're right about Jimmy. Anytime I've interviewed anyone from the golden era, it's always Jimmy Hart helped me this and Jimmy Hart did that for me without even being asked.
Yeah.
He just did it because he was a kind person, still is a kind person as we talk right now. But I made a mistake, so no one will yell at me. June is when the Macho Man signed with the WWF. My bad. July 6th, 1985 is when he makes his debut actually on television. And he's brought in as this talent, and they dub him the top free agent in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
So already he comes in with a storyline. The storyline is the managers are obsessed. They want a piece of this new character, the Macho Man Randy Savage. So now we have Bobby Heenan, we got Jimmy Hart, Johnny Valiant, Freddie Blassie, Mr.
Freddie
Fuji.
Blassie
They're all trying to figure
competing.
out how they can sign the Macho Man to their group, the Heenan family, or
Yeah.
so on and so
Yeah.
forth. That to me is a great indication because a lot of wrestlers, if we've talked, they just come in. It's their debut. It's the Bushwhackers, or it's Powers of Pain. Macho Man comes in with a storyline already in a very heavy driven storyline business where it's who is this guy? Oh, he's the top free agent. Why do these managers want him? Because he's the greatest wrestler right now who doesn't have a manager. I'm in. Like we already are establishing what's this guy about. And to me, that's a great way to introduce someone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when you've got some of the biggest mouthpieces that you have working for you,
Yeah.
because that's what these guys are, as managers, and it's a great way because look at all these promos he's getting from some of the best in the business.
All of them.
Yeah, but he came in with what he wanted to do in mind, and that was to introduce Miss Elizabeth, that would be the one who would manage him. And I'm sure he met with some resistance to that initially. That she was certainly something to look at, but at the same time, how what do you take it? She's just going to be this, arm candy that comes out in the ring, and what is she going to offer? I had, no idea what that would develop into at the time. So you have to imagine that there was some raised eyebrows going, well, okay, well, that's what he wants. But that love story had begun, long before that. Randy and Liz meeting at a gym that she was working behind the counter, and he talks her up, chats her up, and this real life romance blossoms, and they end up marrying in 1984. So even before he got there, which, the fact that they were able to keep it pretty much kayfabe for so long as they did, I
Right.
think
It's pretty
it
good.
was pretty amazing. But it just shows you even then how at that point Randy was just laser focused on what he wanted to do in a sense. And if he wasn't sure, he sure didn't show it. And that had to take some balls to say, no, this is the way I want to do it. I'm bringing in my wife to be my manager, and she's going to travel with me everywhere. And he brought his brother along too,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
they told he said to Vince, I mean, the gall in a sense, that this is what you want me. This is what I'm gonna need, and to bring his brother in, and hey, you got some room for my brother too, and
Sure.
oh, not at the top of the card, as Lanny
Leaf and
tells it
Lenny.
that, yeah, but and Lanny openly admits that he rode those coattails. He said, "I would have never had the career that I was gifted." He said, "I would have carried the coats back to backstage to be there," and that was the kind of relationship that he had with his brother. They were incredibly close. And as you could imagine, the way they grew up, and early on, they moved all over the place. Uh, you know, Lanny was born in
Yeah, his father
Canada.
was their father was in the Navy.
Yeah, they were all over the place, and then they settled in Ohio, and you know, that's adding some a stable life to a sense. But they were really close. And Randy took care of his little brother his whole life, the whole time he was on this planet. And that's just a really great story about the two of those guys, anyway. But it just shows you who Randy was and the people that were close to him in his circle. There was no one who was more loyal than Randy Savage.
I know that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Bringing in his wife, though, as I think this is like the beginning of realizing people shouldn't bring in their spouses into the wrestling business because it causes problems. And you know, bringing in your wife first off on
Mm.
television and Miss Elizabeth. And when I think of women's managers or valets, it's like they have an expression like Sherry can make like a mean face or a happy face. Miss Elizabeth, I feel like I describe her as America's sweetheart, where
Yeah.
she's not going to have range of that much. She's going to be very, I'm here to smile, but I'm also, you can clearly tell I'm very timid. Like her
Hmm.
character wasn't fleshed out. It felt like she was
No.
an actual real person, and you've met someone like her in real life where you're like, she's so beautiful, but why is she with this husband? Like this guy is
Yeah.
abusive. Like this guy doesn't look very nice to her, but yet she loves him so, like a Marge Simpson to a Homer Simpson, I guess. What'd you think of this combo? Because it worked perfectly, but she doesn't have the acting chops as a Sherry Martel or a Moolah.
Yeah. No, she was very limited, and really throughout her run. Towards the end, of course, when she got
Jake,
more involved and took some bumps, but she was very limited. She wasn't, and it's funny because when they had ICW, and she hosted some of their shows, or and did interviews, which we never
okay.
really got to see her, do that.
And she was on
But
Spotlight, that show
remember,
you
I was
were
going
on
to
for
say
a while too. Yeah.
she did host Spotlight with Vince, and that didn't last very
Mm-mm.
long. It was, I think, just Vince liked being around her. And then when I don't think Randy really dug it, and also the fact that they would have to come off the road and tape the shows, and
Right.
that's how, fortunately or maybe unfortunately, that I ended up on the set
With
with Sherry,
Sherry,
which is another show.
we did that
Check it
episode. It
out.
was great. It was a great
Yeah,
story.
it was. But she was, to your point, she was limited. But boy, did they make it work.
Yeah.
And today, can you imagine having that gimmick, what their dynamic between them and how it worked then? Even just a few years ago, there's no way, because that whole thing was based on him being this control freak, mean to her, do get over here, do this, do that, and she was always, I heard people describe it, and she was like jump scare. She was jumpy,
Yes,
you
that's a
know,
good
ooh,
description of
and
her,
it was
but
kind of
that's
like
also scary.
an abused woman,
Yes.
and people saying like, get away from him, and then when it came out, because the dirt sheets and everything, eventually that they were a real life couple, and people would see the dynamic that they had, and they're thinking, is that her real life? Like, my God, if it is, so that's where all the stuff came out. The rumors that he would lock her in these rooms while he would
Yeah,
go
I didn't know
out, and
anything about that until Dark Side of the
yeah,
Ring started poking around about that.
yeah, and of course it's his brother, but Lanny said there was no truth. Like, my God, there's no truth to that whatsoever. He would never do that. But he said, did he want her wandering around in the men's locker room or backstage with it? No, but she didn't want to either.
Okay.
So, but at the same time, he was like that, very controlled, very obsessive about her. Guys, if guys would talk to her or something, he'd confront them, because, well, come on, would you want your wife in any circumstance to be traveling on the road around
No, there's 90,
wrestlers
it's
that,
like
right,
99% of the
right?
people backstage are men. And you got Moolah,
This is
you
old
got
school too.
Sherry, and you
Remember
got, oh my
this?
God, look at this
Yes.
beautiful woman, Miss Elizabeth. Of course, all the men are
Yeah.
going to attract to her.
Yeah. And there wasn't this Me Too. Guys were, sexual harassment was a part of everyday life,
Right.
that, uh, in that business. And people, the people like Sherry who would knock your fucking head off
Yes.
if you did something to accost her. She was tough enough. Moolah was, these other people were
Moolah would put a
like that
cigarette out
too.
on your face,
Yeah,
probably.
she would. Yeah.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, right. But that's, I can't even imagine what life was like for women in professional wrestling back then. And so Randy would naturally, of course, be protective of his wife. The choice to
Yeah.
them make, making that choice to bring her on the road, that was a bold move, Cotton, as they say, because this wasn't every 3 weeks she'd come in. I mean, she was on the road with him, and they traveled together.
Do you think it was a protective thing where, like, again, those stories have come out as like, oh, Macho Man would lock her in rooms and leave her there and not let her come out? But I wasn't there, so I don't.
No, I was, and
These are rumors.
I was there, Steve, and
I'm not talking about that though. I'm saying, do you
I
think
never
he brought
saw
her on the
that.
road when he came to the
Yeah.
WWF to be like, I can't, I'm so protective of my wife. I won't let her stay at home by herself. I'm going to make sure she's in front of me at all times so I can make sure. Like, is that him just in general, you think? Like, I'm
That's
not
probably
saying,
part of it.
I love the wrestler, but I don't have to know the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm sure there was a lot of it involved because Randy also knew the price that a lot of
That's true
professional
too.
wrestlers paid as far as being married, and in all cases, the guy, if he was married, he's got a home somewhere he's set up, and maybe they have a few kids, and they get home whenever they can, every couple of weeks for a couple of days. And nobody has ever done a study, but I'm sure if you went through that, and the percentage of marriages that lasted was
Slim.
probably pretty low.
I'm guessing very, very
So,
low.
uh, maybe thought, well, we got to go for this, and I want you by my side when I'm doing it. I know it's unusual; people wouldn't do it, but I feel like if we're not going to be together, we're going to end up like them.
Man,
So,
when you said
but
jump
also,
scare,
yeah.
when you said jump scare earlier of her character, like
Yeah.
that, oh my, it really, I was, wow, I think you're right,
I
where
was,
she
you know,
seems like she's being abused, and
Hughes,
obviously
yeah.
she was on camera, but yeah, the jump scare personality, I've never heard someone put it so perfectly like that, because I
Mm.
couldn't, because like, yes, she's so sweet, and she's so nice, oh, I love her so much, but what is she doing here? Like in my brain, like what are you doing as a character? Why Johnny Valiant, you got Bobby Heenan, you got Mr. Fuji, like she's brought in. She adds really nothing to the promos. Macho Man talks and she sits there and she says maybe one line and that's it, and they go out
Mhm.
and wrestle. It's completely different from Bobby Heenan speaking for the Macho Man and then Macho Man saying a couple lines and they go out there. So
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
different dynamic.
And it was, that was part of it, but uh, that the way it came off, I said, like today or even a few years ago, you would have had people out front protesting. That you've got this guy and she's the typical wife who can't get away, and they're just so. But that back then it worked, crazily enough. It really did. And then they play this thing on that he softens up and eventually realizes how much he loves this woman. And of course, we have it all play out later
Then it's Hulk Hogan's
when
fault,
things are
but
falling apart. They come together, get TV married.
mhm. TV
Just
married.
a crazy scenario then. But as we were talking about with Randy, it shows you how focused that guy was and obsessive about everything, his career and matches, and he would plot them out to the T, and his outfits, all of it was all part of the plan, and he never deviated. And I've also talked about how thing about Randy is every time he went out there, he gave everything he had. And his philosophy was, and this came from his father, that you don't go out there and you don't deliver what people have given you money for, then you're no better than a thief.
Wow.
That was his whole philosophy of it. I might as well be a burglar because I'm stealing money from these people. And that was emblazoned in his brain and his soul. And that's why he would go out there and wrestle when he should have been in the hospital, when he had a staph infection, and went out there and delivered an incredible match.
Yeah,
And
WrestleMania
and
5, right?
that's just how he operated. It just everything.
You're right
Everything
about
was
that
all
too.
about what he was doing. Yeah.
It felt like we talked about earlier where like he's fighting Bill Dundee because it's really about a man's only thing I have is my honor. And so
Hmm.
if you hurt that, then I have nothing. And this is a man's world. In today's world, it's like, oh, if you even use the term boys will be boys, they're like, oh, you can't say that. But
Yeah.
yet here,
Yeah.
it's like the only thing they have is like, this is a yard of tough guys and I have to be tough too, and I can't let anyone push me around. So everyone's afraid to push anyone's buttons because they don't want to get their ass handed to them. Because then
Yeah.
you're no longer tough in the world of tough men. And
Yeah.
so the Macho Man Miss Elizabeth thing works out perfectly for both of them because their characters excel in the back half of 1985. We even roll into 1986, Macho Man wins the Intercontinental title from Tito Santana, who had it at the time. This isn't
Yeah.
Strikeforce Tito Santana. This isn't El Matador. This is Tito Santana, who is on the cartoons. He's on your blankets. He's on your pillowcases. He was everywhere, but he loses
Yeah.
Boston Garden, February 19th, 1986, the Macho Man. Macho Man's only been here for what? Maybe 7 months, 8 months, and now he is their secondary championship. To me, that shows Elizabeth is doing everything right. Even Lanny Poffo worked out fine. Macho Man's killing it. Like everything is going right for the Macho Man, becoming the Intercontinental Champion. And then he rolls into WrestleMania 2 as the champion. Like
Yeah.
to me, that no one has been doing this. We've seen Million Dollar Man come in, Hacksaw, we have seen Jake, we've seen all these wrestlers. This has not happened for any of them, but Macho Man got this. Why?
Yeah. Well, obviously, as I mentioned, what Lanny said, he was ready. That was another thing about it. He didn't come in and then have to get his feet under him,
Yeah.
to figure out how to do this in these big stages and everything like that. He was ready. He had been ready years prior, and you probably imagine that he had already played out this whole scenario of how I'm gonna do this. Maybe didn't know exactly the steps and all this thing, but he's thinking
Gonna do it.
how this is going to go. And so he was laser focused. And as I said, every time he went out there, he didn't let up, no matter what it was, what it was, a house match, whatever it was. He went out there to deliver and get better. And also when it all comes down to, okay, do they like him? Are they responding?
Oh, they were.
Hell yeah, they were, and that's why they understood it, that yeah, we got something here. And then when you put the strap on them, that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot because they can take it away anytime they want to if it ain't happening. but he proved that that was a good move.
Hmm.
And as we would see, uh, legendary matches, and one in particular with Ricky Steamboat. And as they say, it takes two to make that dance work. Thank God for Randy that there was Steamboat, and he was at the peak of what he could do in the ring. And they, as we've mentioned before, sometimes you get these guys that are tremendous performers, but for whatever reason they don't sync up in the ring.
Yeah.
These two, man, you ever get the chance, take
Oh
a
yeah,
look
we'll
at
talk
these
about
two
that in a
guys.
second.
Yeah, okay.
I want to talk about George Animal Steel for a minute before we get to WrestleMania 3. Because WrestleMania 2, the
Yeah.
whole storyline building into that is George Animal Steel has a crush on Miss Elizabeth, and Macho Man obviously doesn't like this, so they
Uh-huh.
have their match at WrestleMania 2 where Macho Man wins, defending his Intercontinental title against George Animal Steel. But to me, I always loved the story I've heard of George Animal Steel, where he was also a school teacher. And
It's true.
and so he would go in as a teacher, tie and shirt and teach whatever. And no one recognized him as George the Animal Steel. They didn't know that he was that man on television. They just saw him as a teacher because he was so good at his character versus being in the real world. To me, my God, method acting when
Yeah.
you're in front of a classroom of kids who observe everything most of the time, and suddenly I can't tell the difference between this man who's eating turnbuckles on television versus the man who's teaching me about, geometry. To me, that's a kudos to George Animal Steel. He doesn't get enough love in today's world, so I wanted to tip
Well,
my hat to him.
he didn't have to do a whole lot now, Steve. I mean, really,
But hey, man, Andre the
uh,
Giant didn't do a lot
kind
either.
of
But
that, kind
we're
of
still
the,
talking about him, right?
yeah,
I'm just
kind of. I
saying.
always like he was kind of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That
Yeah.
that kind of that character.
Oh, yeah,
That,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
as you
Yeah.
mentioned, between it was Randy the same guy outside of the ring as he was inside the ring, and yes, George the Animal Steel. That's like that was a big separation that he could come in wearing the blazer and the tie, and you didn't know who the hell this guy was, and he's
No,
having this intelligent conversation with you. And
he's eating
I always
turnbuckles.
remember years later because he became an agent too, after that, and I never got over. When I'd be talking to him, I'm like, this is the guy with the green tongue, who ate
Hmm.
turnbuckles,
He's like reading the newspaper, like the New Yorker, like,
yeah, the Times, yes,
oh, very. Oh,
yeah,
really? Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah,
turnbuckle eating? Yes, I will do it later.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
But it showed you that you can make anything work, and the obsession that George had for Miss Elizabeth, and requited, I must say, um, you know, it was a good run, but
Not.
nothing
Yeah.
compared to
I'm
what
not
we would
saying
see
Julian
later.
Steele is going to give us Ricky Steamboat style matches, but I just wanted to bring up that WrestleMania 2 is just funny because, it's just Macho Man's like, what's your first match at WrestleMania? I fought the
Yeah,
guy who ate turnbuckles and he's
yeah,
obsessed with
yeah.
my
Remember
wife.
that?
He's got a green tongue.
Yeah,
Like, no one goes back and rewatches that match. WrestleMania 2 is a pay per view. I don't think anyone really goes back and
no.
watches. Maybe someone does. We'll have to do a whole episode about that. 3 locations, mistakes. But in '86, though, also Macho Man's getting wins over Hulk Hogan, who's the world champion, but count out victories on house shows. And he
Hmm.
even beats a living legend, Bruno Sammartino. So again, we're not just having him beat George Steele. We're having him beat Hogan on house shows to see what's the reaction. Like,
Yeah.
are people happy about this? Are they angry about this? Is this going to sell more tickets when we say next time you can come back and see Hogan get revenge on Savage? Buy tickets now at the box office. Beating Bruno Sammartino again, someone who doesn't get respected in today's world as much either. One of the world champions who established the WWF. So these are huge wins, in my opinion, for someone who just came in July of 1985.
Yeah. Well, you're getting a big push. And, nothing happens if it doesn't happen in the ring. So early on, when those matches, when he did get into the ring with Terry, you could see there was something there that these guys could really work together. Randy could really pretty much work with anybody, but you would see some sparks in when you'd get a matchup with some of these guys that would step in. And even then, you saw that these guys had something when they were in the ring together. And there's obviously a question mark. You know, Hulk's a big guy, and Randy, I mean, professional wrestler, he's not necessarily small, but he wasn't.
He's not
And
tall.
you're thinking like, how do you put these guys together and make it an even matchup? And Randy's athleticism and his ability to work and the way he could cut promos, that's why all that magic worked. And you started to see it then. And I know Vince McMahon did too. He was thinking already, okay, well, we're gonna make this is gonna be something down the road as they zoom in because
I
they
was gonna
make some
say
really
you
important
put your
point.
fingers up, so your web camera was like, "Oh, let's."
Back off there, mister. And that extreme close up there, I hope you realized what a great point I was making, Steve.
The
But
camera loves
it
you.
was really, it was true though. You could see that there was, what do they call it? Chemistry between Randy and the Hulkster. And I have to imagine that Vince was even at that point going, okay, I don't know what we're going to do with this, but these two have something. And as we would see later, it really would be, some of the greatest storylines we would see in the WWE
Yep,
between those two.
lust in Hogan's eyes. We'll get to that
Yeah.
on another
The
episode. But
oldest tale in history.
that's right. Two
Yeah.
best friends torn apart by a lady and a
Hmm.
championship, according
Yeah.
to, Hogan just won the title. Sure, okay,
Mm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, the back half of 86 also has a storyline that I think is one of those first storylines where you realize, like, oh, this is a little scary. Where Ricky Steamboat gets his throat crushed on the guardrail by the Macho Man, coming off the top rope to the outside with a double axe handle onto Ricky Steamboat. So they're playing it up that he can't breathe. Like, we got to get the ambulance here, we get the
Mm.
doctor. Like, we need to go to the hospital because now we have an injured Ricky Steamboat. And this is one of those
Yeah.
moments where, like, when you think of Jake with the snake biting the Macho Man, or Repo Man hanging the British Bulldog, Earthquake killing Damien, like, these are these little moments where you're like, damn, like, we're not just doing wrestling here, we're doing some heavy stories. And this one,
Reality here. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
heavy, where we have taken out Ricky Steamboat, and he's got a wife, and he has a baby on the way, and Savage couldn't care less. But this sets up one of, I think, the first ever match that stole the show at WrestleMania. It's for the Intercontinental title. It's Macho Man Randy Savage losing to Ricky Steamboat.
Mhm.
And this match, honestly, like I said, I think it's the first match that people go back and if they have a marathon, this is it. On the same card, though, you do have Hulk Hogan body slamming onto the Giant, which was the reason everyone traveled across the world to see WrestleMania 3. But what they got was Savage versus Steamboat that stole the show. What do you think of that part of it all? Because this is the first time that we've seen something like this, because this is only the third WrestleMania where the main event isn't the thing people are talking about the body slam, but people are
Yeah.
like, did you see that match though? Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was different.
I think, yeah, it was the match of the year. I mean, people really, people that understood professional wrestling and what was really involved knew that that was a classic. And of course, it was the body slam heard around the world, of course, and we
Yeah,
keep talking about it to this day.
of course.
But at the same time, man, that was just incredible to watch. And it's another one where you get two guys in the ring and they have got this chemistry and just everything works. You hear these guys talk about matches when they have those, and they say, it's just one of those, like, nothing can go wrong. I mean, everything, your timing, everything you do, because you know, we talk about how Randy would plan out these matches and stuff, but I guarantee you there's always that play in there where you have to, you have to improvise.
Hmm.
And these guys were just magic together. And I have to think that, Vince had to be backstage going, because he was always thinking about what happens when Hulkamania tires out here. What are we going to have? And you have to imagine that Vince is back there thinking, maybe we've got some people to follow up here with us to promote and keep this all going, at least that day for sure. And it was. That's why that's one of the greatest WrestleManias ever. Just not just because of that main event, but because people were treated to that matchup between Randy and Steamboat. And I don't think Ricky Steamboat gets the credit of what an incredible performer that he was. And things happen in his career where he would step out and I think that hurt him in the long run.
Yes, it did.
But some of when you talk about some of the greatest matches that ever have taken place in professional wrestling, you hear his name more than once.
Of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
he has a trilogy with Ric Flair and
yeah,
WCW, and it's one of the best as well. So yeah, Ricky Steamboat is up there, and I think one of the greatest. But you're right about that. Him stepping away after winning this Intercontinental title at this, he's like, "Oh, I'm having a baby. Can I go home on
yeah,
vacation?" It's like,
yeah. Yeah.
bro,
Well,
everybody
yeah,
else is here
yeah,
doing the work, missing their kids, missing the recitals and Christmases, and you want to go home and get to be with them? Like, I
yeah.
don't think so. And I think that honestly, it hurt
It
Ricky
cost
Steamboat.
it seriously cost him, and that's where we've talked about how this business worked. Then you never wanted to get out of line
Nope.
because you may not be able to get back in, or you may have to go all the way to the back.
Start over.
So you didn't have any guaranteed contracts. So if you took off, Raymond talking about, he had a leg that was injured that took him 8 months to heal, and he still worked every night. And there was points where he says that they wheeled him on the plane on a wheelchair, and
Wow.
3 days later he's back in the States wrestling, where he couldn't even get in the ring, but he had to get out there and perform. So because you knew back then that, well, we will try and hold that spot for you, but if you're gone for too long, we got to move on here, and you
Yeah.
got no guarantee, and you're not going to get paid. Anytime you're missing those shows, those houses, that's a paycheck. That's money that out of your pocket.
Hmm.
So certainly credit Ricky for making that life decision.
Of
And I'm sure he
course.
values it to this day that he was there for his child and everything else. But as far as career, it impacted his career forever.
Yeah. I
It
agree
really
with that
did.
too. And it's unfortunate for him here, but it's just
Yeah.
funny to think that, listen, in 1 year from now, the Macho Man will be in the main event of WrestleMania 4, winning the WWF Championship in the
Yeah.
tournament against the Million Dollar Man.
Hmm.
Look at that. He loses the Intercontinental title here. 1 year later, becomes the WWF champion. Now, I have a question for you because it's still brought up, and I don't think it's a real rule. The Macho Man, is he the first person that this lore surrounds the Intercontinental title, where if you win the Intercontinental title, you'll become the world champion? Like, you're next in line, because it doesn't happen for everyone. It's a very small list, and the
Yeah.
list is decent, but it's not everybody who won the Intercontinental title. Like, Macho Man and Warrior clearly indicate that. Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, same thing. Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, perfect. But then after that, it becomes this weird, like, everyone thinks that this rule is forever. I don't think it's
Yeah.
forever, and I think it's born here with the Macho Man.
Yeah. And I think you answered the question really is that, early on, that's the way it was. It was, okay, let's give him a lofty title, literally,
Yeah.
but it's not the heavyweight world championship, and see how the reaction he gets. Let's see how long he can sustain it, because wearing the big crown there that's a heavy load.
Right, right,
But
right.
we can do this with the Intercontinental Championship, and it's second in line. It's the vice president in a sense where you're testing out, but as we say, not every vice president becomes president.
It's a
But
small
you
list
got to
too.
see, yeah. But really though, you want to see what the reaction is when you have that strap,
Hmm.
and does it enhance you? Do they need it? And as we saw with Randy, every time he got something like that, even as the king, he made that thing work.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
love King
right.
Macho. I love
But
Macho
but
King.
as the Intercontinental Champion, yeah, it enhanced him. It made him. It set him higher and higher in the pecking order of the WWF. So yeah, back then that was kind of the succession that you would follow, but didn't mean everybody would get it. Would be
No.
guaranteed that you had to prove yourself that you were worthy.
Yeah, some people just had, like, Honky Tonk Man, Mr. Perfect, Texas Tornado, British Bulldog.
Yeah.
There's just a few people from that golden era who have the IC title but don't actually become world champion. And that's why I think this rule got brought up. And I was like, where was it born? Where did this lore come from? And it feels like it's here, where the guy was Intercontinental champion for about 8 months, loses it to Ricky Steamboat. By the end of '87, Macho Man's trying to get it back, but now the Honky Tonk Man has the championship because Ricky Steamboat wanted to go home. And so, that set up the Mega Powers forming and leads us off into, WrestleMania 4 winning the world title. So it's just crazy to see, like, 1 year later, you lost. You lost at this match, but really you won, because now they're slowly turning you into this baby face. It's not right away. It's a very slow process. It involves Liz almost being attacked by Honky and the Hart Foundation on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event in late '87. So clearly Vince, before even Ricky Steamboat wanting to go home, was like, okay, I got plans for this guy, and the only way to do this is I got to get this title off of him so he can become a babyface.
Yeah, that's how that it worked back then with them, is that Randy could do both. They saw that. He was a great heel. It was it was easy to for him to develop that, and that whole persona, and especially you're picking on a woman in a sense that is for sure that that you're going to get heat. But at the same time, there's always that he can redeem himself. He can become this better man.
Yep.
As it would go. So being able to turn him was kind of a natural thing. Like, how do we do that? Well, like I said, let's make him a better man. Let's make him realize what he's got. Jeez. And that's how it went from there, and it just worked perfectly. And then turn him back. Like you could go. It was
pretty easy.
Yeah, it was clear cut too. It wasn't that he's still a bad guy, but we still, we love him anyway. That was a whole different. It's not like Stone Cold type heat.
Oh God, Stone Cold be like, I'm gonna stomp on your grandma.
He had to have a redemption. He had to have this, seeing the light, this epiphany.
Well, I think having the best match of 1987, and for a lot of wrestling fans, it's the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. So having Savage do that with Steamboat, I think that gave every fan the right to go, you know what? I like this guy, even though he's a little mean to his manager. I like him. And then eventually he becomes this baby face and world championship a year later. And, we talked about it when I think we started doing podcast originally. We talked about this whole, this night. Did Hogan get upset with Savage and Steamboat for putting on this classic while everyone's talking about this body slam? Yes, we are, still to this day. It was even the Hall of Fame, but is there jealousy brewing here? Is this where it all begins, this up and down relationship between Macho Man and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3?
Well, I think that tension always existed. I think initially even when Randy came in and the success he started to have early on, I think you had Hulk looking over his shoulder a little bit, but not really shaken by it. But there was always that, that tension, I think, between the two of them. And, for Randy, it's that I want that, you got it. And then for Terry, it was just, this guy, they love it. They're popping for him. So that's kind of a natural thing. Hulk claimed that they were at one point really genuinely good friends, worked out, saw each other all the time. But I think that no matter what, there was always that underlying thing between them that eventually legit would tear them apart. And, certainly part of it was Liz. That's for sure. We know the story, and that's down the line. But I think that in a way, it was a healthy rivalry early on for them because it made them better. Hulk knew he had to step it up, and then Randy knew I have to work harder in his eyes. And so, I think that was from the very beginning when he came in. Hulk wasn't an idiot. I mean, he could tell when somebody's got it, and he knew that Randy had it.
I know. It's so insane to think how he actually has it immediately. Like there is no, oh, we gotta shoot all these vignettes to get this guy over, or it's like boop.
No, he had it down, brother. He had it
Yeah, dude.
down.
He
Oh
walks
yeah.
out there. Oh yeah, it's got all these managers wanting him, and then he introduces Miss Elizabeth, a family man bringing his brother as well, crushing the throat of Ricky Steamboat, sending us
Yeah.
off into one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, beating up George Animal Steele for even looking at his woman. Macho Man so far, as we're talking about him and his career in the WWF, so far, so good. And next time we'll have to do another episode about the continuation of 87 into 88, the mega powers coming together and then exploding. We have done a podcast sort of like that, but let's give a fresh perspective next time we talk because I think we've learned a lot today, and I think we should continue the hatred between Hulk Hogan and Macho Man on another podcast.
Oh yeah. You know what I'm gonna do right now? You know what I'm gonna do right now, Steve? I'm gonna snap into a Slim Jim. Oh yeah. Dig
Oh
it.
yeah! I thought you were gonna say put more cream in your coffee because it always rises to the top.
Yeah, I got to get the Slim Jim in there.
You got to get the Slim Jim. Hopefully they'll give us some free Slim Jims. So we'll see on that. But again,
And
thank you.
also, Stan, I want to thank you for filling in and give my best to Steve. Tell him I'll see him next time. Okay.
It'll take about a week, and Ian Fall will disappear, and Steve Fall will reappear, and I'll have to wear a hoodie. It's nice out now where I live, so I don't have to wear hoodies anymore. Just t-shirts, man. Just t-shirts. I'm still a slob with you and your collar. But again, thank you so much for being here on Prime Time with Sean Mooney. I'm Steve Fall. That's my name, not Ian. He's Sean Mooney. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Ooh, yeah. Dig it.
It's the golden age of WWE. Larger than life.